بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى من بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله عليكم جميعا. Welcome, أهلا وسهلا to the fifth session of Al-Andalus, From Rise to Fall. The major themes what we're looking at today will be one continuing from the previous class, that a savior who has a strategy, a savior with a strategy, and what was that strategy and how he implements it. We will then, the second theme will be how that continues to produce power, progress, and which lasts for 100 years at least, a century is made. This platinum jubilee which we find, and then how is this dynasty derailed? So these are the three themes that we'll be concentrating on. Right. Okay, to go through the objectives with a bit more clarity, that Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil, looking at what follows from his success, the upheaval which he has to face, the outcome, what he sets up. This is what we will be learning today, what he sets up, this imara, this kingdom or dynasty, and then a lineage which comes from Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil, which also leaves behind a legacy. We will look at this era as a tripartite era, okay, one of three different levels to it. And we'll kind of take that into turn, we'll take that in turn. We'll look at those who followed Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil, people like Hisham, Hakam, Abdul Rahman II, and how this concludes this 100 years, this type of platinum jubilee of power and success in the Iberian Peninsula. The second era we start to see is an era of weakness. Okay, so we start to see, all of a sudden we're going to see things, tribulations, trials, not just corrosion, but something actually crumbling. We will be introduced to certain characters of the past, like Umar ibn Hafsun, Ziryab. We'll look at a new emerging problem from the north. We will also then zoom out and take a look at a whole comprehensive perspective of the Muslim world. We'll try and understand the psyche and the mindset of the everyday Muslim at that time and why it was the way it was. And what we'll try to do is take away some lessons from this. So there is quite a bit to really look at, bi'idhnillah. So da'na nabda, let us begin. Right, from where we saw last, we were taking a look at a peninsula that was really in a perilous state, it was going to destruction. And then, if anything, it could be saved by a miracle. That was really the only hope people had. And then we see this miracle arrive. A miracle embodied by Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah. And we saw how he once again stabilizes the peninsula. How people, even who come after him, his adversaries, the likes of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, had given him the laqab, the title of Saqr Quraysh. Okay, that he becomes known as the Falcon of Quraysh. And really it was, it wasn't something that wasn't a praise that Abu Ja'far al-Mansur was doing. out of any form of friendship. He was a clear adversary to Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah. They were totally not in favor of the Umayyad household, nor the type of power that it had tried to establish and things like this. So, but as people have historically said, ash-shahadatu ma shahidat bihi al-a'da', that a true testimony is that which your adversaries will uphold. Meaning, and he had to accept that. But what happens after that? Because we left it there, we saw that Cordoba was taken over, we saw that cities were getting built, we saw that bridges and so on, and the masjid and all these type of efforts and endeavors were underway. But what continues to happen? Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah from 138 Hijri, since he's kind of taken over and stabilized the ground, the following 4 years remain a consistent uphill struggle. Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah is faced with many type of rebellions which had preceded him, which were already in the peninsula, which he has to extinguish. He has to put out. The French frontiers was something which once again the French king at the time, Charles Martel, had kind of reconquered, and there was a lot of type of turbulence in that region as well. There were things like remnants of racism and tribalism and all this from before, which we'd heard about in the previous session. So Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah sets aside a strategy. He first of all begins to focus and bring his attention to some key elements. First of all, a military focus. He begins to construct an army. And he doesn't just say, okay, anything. He doesn't just say, okay, right guys, like the people before him, we're going to do this. His army has a vision behind it. What he starts to do is enlist people from different races and different backgrounds. So he looks at the people, he notices that a large population or a large presence amongst the Muslim population of Al-Andalus is of the Muwalladeen, the mixed race people. So those people who were born from Muslim migrants and indigenous Spanish women, this mixed race type of category of people was now quite a predominant phenomenon. So what he does is he reaches out to the Muwalladeen. He starts to open up many military opportunities for them. He gets them, they become a core component in his army. He then also ensures that he has enlisted several people who are from the Berber in his army. He makes sure of this, especially due to the Berber and Arab type of racism which had taken place before. He even reaches out to the tribes. He makes sure that every key tribe, whether they were Qahtani or Adnani, whether they were from Mudar or from Rabi'a, whether they were, ensured people like the Fihriyin who were in a stronghold before, he ensured that they were in his army. The Qaysiyin, people, those from Yemen, people like Abu Sabah al-Yahsubi, who originally had helped Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil get a foothold in Cordoba and in Andalus, but had then kind of plotted to kill him, but was kind of not supported by his people. And Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah was aware of this at the time, yet he still enlists him in his army. He plays it cool, calm and collected. That's what he is. He sets about, so this was one huge aspect and focus. Abu Sabah al-Yahsubi is a good example of even a threat. You see, Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah could have now easily dealt with him, that he was gaining more of a stronghold, but he doesn't. In fact, they say he does eventually deal with him because he realizes of all these conspiracies and problems, but he gives him up to 11 years and then eventually deals with him. Another core component of the military Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah uses are the Saqaliba. And the Saqaliba were the Slavs, but they were a category of people who really the Muslims, and not even the Muslims, Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah himself, what he does, you see, that was a day and age, naturally, in which slavery was a common currency, right? And it was a common occurrence. What he does is he purchases many Slav slaves, but those who are absolute infants. I mean, people that they say would be like anything like up to 3-4 years of age. That's who he purchases. And he purchases so many of them, he acquires them. And he brings them to Cordoba. And he has their tarbiyah done. And most of them were all, at the time when he'd kind of acquired them and brought them to Cordoba, were of a Christian background. He gives them an Islamic tarbiyah. He ensures that they are not only catered for well, but they are trained and educated to a high manner and a very elite degree. So, and these people, the Saqaliba, you will see in time to come, prove to be a very powerful component of the Umayyad dynasty, not just for Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah, but for his offsprings who follow in his footsteps. So the Saqaliba are also a core component, and these people make up his type of army. And then secondly, he focuses on things like the religious and cultural development. So what he does is he pays special care and attention to the ulama, and really kind of attempts to bring them as close as possible to him. So you start to see ulama, they take a liking to him, he and vice versa. He takes a very special and compassionate liking to the ulama. He invests in judges. He makes sure that their needs are taken care of. And I don't mean at all anything like corruption. I mean in the sense of actually caring and listening to when they have to say something. He begins to construct the Masjid of Cordoba with 80,000 gold coins of his time, which was an incredible amount of money. And he actually invests that from his own, what he's actually gaining, and he puts that to build Masjid Cordoba, which would then later continue to be worked on and become the largest masjid in the entire Muslim world. So that's one form of development. Then he begins to develop and rejuvenate the country in terms of building things like the infrastructure, the bridges. He builds one of the most fascinating bridges that Cordoba was ever, or Andalus was ever to see. It has several arches and it has things like mills, and we spoke of this in one of the previous sessions. He builds ships. He realizes that one of the weaknesses which Muslims had historically was their lack of experience and wisdom in sea warfare, and so that's why he concentrates on building ships. He has artillery depots constructed and made. He has the first mint type of money minting type of factory, if you like, set up in Al-Andalus. The first mint that is ever established is by Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah. Then what he starts to do is construct he pays a particular attention really to constructing the greenery of Al-Andalus, or investing in the greenery of Al-Andalus. So he starts to construct and cater for gardens, and he builds this one garden which is known as Rassafa. Okay, now Rassafa, what he does is mirrors a garden which was built in the Middle East, in Damascus, by his grandfather Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, who was one of the most powerful Umayyi Khalifas. And he mirrors this Rasafa in around Cordoba in Al-Andalus with that one in Damascus. And he has foreign and exotic plants and trees brought to it. In fact, they say the palm tree he had ordered in. And every palm tree, this is what people say, that followed in Al-Andalus came from these palm trees which he brought into the Rasafa. So as then they used that, they kind of used it to pollinate or however to kind of grow, to further grow more palm trees throughout the entire peninsula. So these type of projects you see Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah investing in. And this garden aspect isn't just a small thing. You see, it's something which Muslims have taken huge pride in historically, in building these gardens. They say this Rasafa that he built was the largest garden that was ever constructed in Islam. And it was also a way and a method for him to kind of remember or reminisce about the lost land, if you like, for him, or home, which was Damascus. So all these things are taking place. In addition to that, he assesses the peninsula and realizes where are their weaknesses and where are the threats coming from. So he sees that in the northeast, by the French frontier, there is a potential threat. He realizes in the northwest there is a small kingdom known as Lyon, or in Arabic the Sakhra, and he realizes that is an area of weakness as well. And he knows that the stronghold of the Muslims really with the capital is in the south, Cordoba, which is really more south Andalusia. So what he does is he sets about these military barracks, these military type of camps, and he sets a huge camp which he calls the large regiment, the large camp, al-Thaghr, and he calls it al-Kabir, and he sets that up in the northeast by Zaragoza or Saragosta. He sets it up there, and the medium one he sets in Toledo, because that is towards the center of Al-Andalusia. And from there you could reach out to any rebellion, you could reach out to any place you need to go. And then he has a small camp set up in the northwest by the kingdom of Lyon. One of the things he continues to do, and this was actually a habit, or I mean it's been referred to as almost like a cultural, almost as a habitual practice, if you like, of the Umayyads, was that they would have a military campaign twice every year. Because people before the Umayyads, or in different parts, used to have these campaigns at least once a year. And they used to have them in the winter sometimes. They would kind of reach out to neighboring places and they would perform these type of conquests and liberations and jihad and so on. Now, what the Umayyads, the Umayyin introduced were the Sawa'if as well, which was from the word Saif, like summer. So they would in the summer time have also a campaign, and in the winter time have a campaign as well. So the Sawa'if, Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah, who obviously grew up in the whole, the Khilafah household and was well aware of these customs and things, he continues this trend of the Sawa'if, of these campaigns twice a year. He then begins to invest in ports. He realizes that ports are a weakness for the Muslim empire, especially in the Iberian Peninsula. So he starts to set up a port in Seville, so in Ishbiliya. He invests in that port, sets it up, kind of redevelops it. In Almeria, he actually constructs a port there that did not exist. In Barcelona, he actually constructs a port. He realizes that a port is extremely important for the Muslims in order for resources, for support, for campaigns, for all, in any aspect of life you may and most likely will at some point need help and assistance. And therefore, whether it's for goods, whether it's for people, whether it's for resources, transport is key. So these are some of the type of projects that Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah is embarking upon. And remember, he's only at this stage, really, he's probably just, what, almost 30 years of age? That's it. A very young person with a huge vision. He was described by the famous Andalusi historian, Ibn Hayyan. Ibn Hayyan, who goes by the kunya of Abu Marwan, and his actual name was Hayyan as well, Hayyan ibn Hayyan al-Qurtubi. And he actually says about him, he has several books on Tariq known as Al-Mateen, and I think he has a few, I mean, he has some in just Tariq, the history of Qudat, Cordoba, of the judges of Cordoba, and so on. But he has some very popular ones as well. In something like 10 volumes, it was kind of printed. Right, so he writes about Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah. كان عبد الرحمن راجح الحلم. Somebody who was very calm and collected. راسخ العلم, sound in knowledge. ثاقب الفهم, established understanding. كثير الحزم, that he was of resolute determination. نافذ العزم, he would see through what he began. بريئا من العجز, somebody who was not just lazy and incapable and somebody like that, just incompetent. Sari an-nahda, somebody who would be quick to get up and do things. Muttasil al-haraka, that if he got onto something he would consistently do it. La yakhludu ila raha, somebody who was not looking out for just ease and comfort. Wala yaskunu ila da'a, and he wasn't somebody that would become easily content with entertainment. وَلَا يَكِلُ الْأُمُورَ إِلَىٰ غَيْرِ, he wasn't somebody that would he would delegate most of his affairs. He was somebody that would want to lead on them himself. ثُمَّ لَا يَنْفَرِدُ فِي إِبْرَامِهَا بِرَأْيِ, but however, when he was leading on affairs, he would always take the opinions of others around him. شُجَاعًا مِقْدَامًا, somebody who wouldn't be afraid to step forward. بعيد الغور, somebody with a far vision. شديد الحدة, a sharp ingenuity about them. قليل الطمأنينة, somebody who wouldn't be complacent. Allahu Akbar. بليغا مفوها, somebody who was eloquent and would speak his mind. شاعرا محسنا, a good poet. سمحا سخيا, very giving and generous, not tight-fisted. طلق اللسان, somebody that would speak. He wasn't a quiet person, somebody that would speak. وكان يلبس البياض ويعتم به ويؤثره, he would often dress in white. He would wear a white imama and prefer the clothing of white. وَكَانَ قَدْ أُعْتِيَ حَيْبَةً مِّن وَلِيِّهِ وَعَدُوِّهِ, somebody who was awe-striking to his friends and foes alike. وَكَانَ يَحْضُرُ الْجَنَائِزِ, and he would himself attend the funeral prayers. وَيُصَلِّ عَلَيْهَا, and pray over them. وَيُصَلِّ بِالنَّاسِ إِذَا كَانَ حَاضِرًا, if he was present he would pray with the people. Al-Juma' wal-A'yad, including Juma' and the Eid. وَيَخْطُبُ عَلَى الْمِنْبَرِ, he would do the khutbah upon the minbar. وَيَعُودُ الْمَرْضَى, he was somebody that would go and visit the sick if he was told. Allahu Akbar. These were the qualities of a leader. He was seen as a commoner almost. In fact, he was advised against this by many of his ministers. They said to him that, you shouldn't mix so freely, you'll lose your type of awe amongst people or your type of authority. But that was not the message which he understood from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That you be amongst the people like one of them. You don't distinguish yourself. And this is how he was. In terms of his tarbiyah, how he kind of gave tarbiyah to the people. How he kind of taught them protocol. There was once a time where a person, there was a battle that had taken place, and the group of soldiers had returned and they were victorious. And one of them was overjoyed, very joyous, and he starts to speak out in the court of Abdul Rahman, raising his voice and addressing him in a way which really was quite disrespectful. And Abdul Rahman, instead of, hey, who do you think you are, so and so, you're just just pathetic little soldier, or blah blah blah, or these type of things which we will see from many historical kings, or worse, some just had them imprisoned, had them punished, had them executed. He actually called him and says to him, he says, listen, he says, perhaps you might want to be mindful in the way that you speak. He says that today you are accompanied by victory, but if this were to become a habit, perhaps you may address me someday when the situation is not so joyful. And God forbid that I was to react. And he says that to him. And the soldier responds by saying, he responds by saying, that may Allah forgive me. And he actually says to him that if I am to make a mistake, that may Allah, if I make a mistake, with every mistake of mine accompany it with a success of yours. And Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah was so kind of like taken aback by this person's response that he actually, he brings that person closer to him. And what he does is he kind of like starts to look out for him, and then this person eventually goes on to take a very key position in the military with Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah. There was an example where once Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah was in a majlis, and a person turns up in front of everybody and asks for he kind of begs for something, like a beggar turns up, and he says, oh, I want this, I haven't had this, and I haven't had this going on, and blah blah blah, I haven't had this for all this time, and I need this. And people are all there, everybody's there. Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah instructs one of the people to kind of say to him that, look, will you deal with this and sort this out for this person? And they do that. And then he calls the person and he says to him, listen, he says, if in the future you ever have a need, he says, perhaps, he says, present it to us, but perhaps do so in a written paper, or the parchment that they had in the day and age. He says, perhaps in a written manner, so it is more concealing of your needs in front of people. And he says, and then present it to me, and he says, and we will see it. But he says, but present it to me after having presented it to your Lord and my Lord. Then, he says, present it to me. And this is the type of tarbiyah that he is giving people. And this is a leader, instructing people on all levels, having a vision which is not just about building cities and developing a country, but about developing the character of people. He even when it comes to his own heirs, he has two children, Suleiman and Hisham, Suleiman being the eldest. And he is at a point where he thinks, I'd like to kind of select an heir. And he does mashura with people for a while. He assesses the situation. And then he arrives at the conclusion that the younger son, Hisham, is more eligible for the leadership role. And that's who he selects. It wasn't just about, see, a person who isn't thinking about things like favoritism, a person who isn't thinking about power, about glory, about just money, and these things come regardless. These things do come, but he doesn't have his eyes set on them. People remember that majlis of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur when he asks the people around him, who is the falcon of Quraysh? Now it becomes clear why Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah was the falcon of Quraysh. When Abu Ja'far al-Mansur said that وَمَصَّرَ الْأَمْصَارِ, and he established cities, وَجَنَّدَ الْأَجْنَادِ, and he constructed armies. He says وَأَعَادَ مُلْكًا بَعْدَ انْقِطَاعِ, and he brought back to life a kingdom and dynasty that had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. And he says لِحُسْنِ تَدْبِيرِ, because of his good planning, وَشِدَّةِ عَزْمِ, and because of his sheer determination to see things through. The same person, folks, the same person who lands on the peninsula single-handed several years before, now dies upon a dynasty with 100,000 soldiers who are horseback at least. And that is just, they're counting the horseback soldiers. They're not counting those who were just general, what they called a standing army. And so people who were just on foot and so on, they used to count those who were horseback. This is what a person had set up. You can now start to see why the type of community, almost cohesion, that he put in place by making all people from different tribes and races work together. Why he gave them a common cause. Why the historians said that if Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah al-Dakhil hadn't entered Andalus, perhaps Islam and the Muslims would have disappeared within the next decade. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets out legacies to be made. Allah chooses people. We see after Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah passes away in 172 Hijri, he is followed by his son Hisham. Now really the era, what we will begin to see is a dynasty which has been set up now. In Arabic they refer to it as al-imara, okay, to do with amirs. Like you are an amir, you have an imara, an independent type of dynasty. Really you can split this dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty, into three eras. One is the era of strength. Then we will see the era of weakness and of turmoil. And then what comes after as the third. So looking at this, Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah al-Dakhil is succeeded by his son Hisham, who ruled for about almost 8 years, just under 10 years. Now what he does is somebody who has a huge passion for the Islamic sciences. He really loved ilm. He brings the ulama very close to him, he befriends them, he takes care of them, he ensures that the madaris of teaching are taking place, he ensures that people are having an education, he invests in the masajid. He is the person who actually, they say officially, kind of brings the Maliki madhab as the state madhab. And they say he was a very close friend of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, the student of Imam Malik. One of the things he does is he actually he kind of enlarges, he furthers the construction of Masjid Qurtuba. So the masjid which his father Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil had set up and was constructing in Qurtuba, he kind of further invests in it, has it expanded. He then also invests heavily in the Arabic language. Now this is very interesting because remember, this is a non-Arab country. The indigenous people are not Arabs, and many of those who have entered the fold of Islam are not Arabs. One of the things that Hisham ibn Abdul Rahman invests in is the Arabic language. And they say he invests in it heavily. May Allah reward him. And one of the things he does is he gets several people to teach. He kind of sets funds into it. He makes it as attractive as possible. He sets up different type of institutes to teach people. He kind of invests in poetry. He has poets and people who are Arabic linguists brought to Qurtuba. He invests in them. And all of a sudden you see the Arabic language is really taking off. The non-Muslims begin to learn Arabic because they seem so amazed by it. This is where you have the whole type of similar to the Mazarab type of movement taking place, where non-Muslims are also kind of beginning to take on Arab cultural aspects, whether it's their language or dress sense and things like this. Now that's what Hisham is hugely known for, that he was an amazing ruler, somebody who ruled, who added strength to what his father had already built. He is followed by his son Hakam, who ruled from 180 Hijri to 206, so about 26 years. Now, the thing is, Hakam ibn Hisham really doesn't toe the line that his father or grandfather had kind of taken. He was somebody that was, historians relate, is quite harsh in his character. He treats people quite harshly, very cold-hearted. He wasn't interested in mixing with the people. He wasn't interested in the people's interests. He begins to impose heavy duties and taxes. Naturally, this causes huge problems, turbulence, upheavals. There are rebellions which begin to take place. There is a massive rebellion which takes place outside of Qurtuba in a place known as Rabta. And in fact, to the extent that Hakam is almost forever known by this title, Hakam al-Rabti. And the way Hakam treats or deals and responds to this rebellion is, what he does is he crushes it. But he doesn't just crush the rebellion. He burns and incinerates almost the entire village and the homes of these people. He then banishes them from Rabwa, expels them. Subhanallah, where is this from the wisdom of his grandfather, Abdul Rahman? How he thought of bringing all people together. Here you have Hakam really dealing very heavy-handedly, with a very heavy hand, to those people who oppose his authority. He has these people from Rabda actually expelled from the entire Iberian Peninsula. And what is known, actually, several of these people do leave, and what, Allahu Akbar, where they go to Crete. Ya Salam, the island of Crete people. And they actually set up an Islamic, not only community, an Islamic people say an Islamic governance, a hukuma Islamia, which then rules Crete for the next 100 years. You see, people of talent are to be invested in. This is how humans excel. But Hakam remains very heavy-handed, has this heavy-hand approach on people. What this also brings upon the Muslims of the Iberian Peninsula is that the Christians in the north, they begin to see some of these rebellions, and some of those kingdoms which were in the north use this opportunity to attack. So France and those surrounding areas kind of have certain attacks which take place, and certain parts of the Muslim land are lost almost indefinitely. And amongst what is lost is also Barcelona, which is lost. And then in the northeast, a new Christian kingdom emerges. The kingdom of Aragon. People, this is a sign that when we become so involved with our own affairs in a negative manner, how we suffer such losses which only time will unfold and tell. Aragon is the same kingdom from which a king and queen will emerge in time. In time we will see, which will result and culminate in the entire collapse of the Muslim empire from the Iberian Peninsula. So people, although we are centuries away from that, but what we are seeing are certain things are emerging. Now, what they do say is that Hakam, one of the things he did do is they say that Allahu A'lam, historians relate that almost 2 years before he died, he did start to see some of the things he'd done wrong, and he did tawbah and attempted to fix and stabilize as much as he could of the place. I mean, one thing he did do is manage to extinguish several rebellions and things like this. He was, obviously because of his heavy-handed nature, he did manage to squash many of the uprisings that took place. He is then succeeded by Abdul Rahman II, or who is referred to as Abdul Rahman al-Awsat, the Abdul Rahman of the middle, really, because another Abdul Rahman will follow. Now, Abdul Rahman II, what he does is he once again concentrates on the Sawa'if, on those campaigns of the summertime campaigns and the conquests in the north. In fact, they say he heads towards the French frontiers again. He does several type of campaigns there. Once again, regains a certain amount of territory. He stabilizes the country. He has three key events which kind of define, or themes which define his rule and kingdom. One was the type of investment in the cultural and religious side of Al-Andalus. Once again with ilm and the ulama. He invests in them heavily. Some of the great ulama in his time, like Muawiyah ibn Salih, who he makes one of the higher judges of Al-Andalus, who was a major muhaddith from like the era, really, like, although a younger person, but coming from those who they say had actually met and taken from Sufyan al-Thawri and Sufyan ibn Uyayna and even Imam Malik, somebody from that caliber. Also people like Sa'id ibn Abi Hind, who Imam Malik in his lifetime had referred to as the Hakim, as somebody like most wise in that sense. Also, not just ulama in a religious sense, but also ulama in the scientific sense. So scientists, Abbas ibn Farnas, he invests in somebody who emerges in his time, one of the earliest people to ever have documented his attempt to take an around the world tour. Somebody who also was the first person to invent or to kind of discover how to produce glass from rocks. That was Abbas ibn Farnas. One of the things, the inventions which emerge in Abdul Rahman II's time is a clock mechanism, which is almost the precisest mechanism in their day and age, which they come up with, the Muslims. People develop what was the prototype to the ink pen. Now you might think, well, what's so big about that? But in a time, people where investment in libraries, in books, in knowledge is at its peak, a pen makes a huge difference. He further invests in the library. The library of Cordoba, they say, had reached, it was reaching almost a few 100,000 strong in terms of books and stuff like this. And so there's a huge investment on the cultural and religious side of things. Then the economic and development side of things. That Abdul Rahman II, what he does is he invests in buildings. He ensures that certain buildings are constructed around different cities throughout Al-Andalus, once again in gardens, upon the trend of his forefathers. He has the roads paved and pavements set up. Allahu Akbar. People, this is Al-Andalus in this time when the rest of Europe is engulfed in darkness. They say during the time of Abdul Rahman II that he had invested so much wealth in amongst the citizenry and the development of the state that there was no begging taking place at all in Al-Andalus. This is what historians write. There is also one of the key events of his time is where they are surprised. Surprised by who? They are surprised, people, by some unwanted guests. And who are those guests? The Vikings. The Vikings land, people, from Scandinavia. They land at the doorstep of Seville. They land with up to 54 ships. And the Vikings were known for just raiding different cities and towns, robbing, looting, burning the place down and taking away their wealth. That was all they used to do. And they attack Seville. And then from Seville, they try to move on to a town known as Shazuna and then Almeria. And this is what's going on. And Abdul Rahman II, hears of this. He assembles his army. They move down south. And that's where he actually confronts, and there is a showdown between him and the Vikings. And people, this was not any usual or ordinary showdown that takes place. They say the battle lasted for up to 100 days, in which almost 35 of the 54 ships of the Vikings were sunk. And the Vikings then completely escaped from there. And then after that, what does he do? One of the things Abdul Rahman II does is he fortifies what is Al-Wadi al-Kabir, that river around Ishbiliya and those places which were susceptible to attack, known as today I think they call it Wadi al-Kabir, which is really Al-Wadi al-Kabir in Arabic, but in Spanish as well. And that's the one. And the thing is, what he does is he invests in the navy, the Muslim navy. He in fact has two major separate navies set up, one to guard what is the western type of coastline of the Iberian Peninsula, and the other to go into the Mediterranean Sea and around towards really what would be almost kind of going out towards Italy and so on, but just coming back, guarding those type of entire sea regions and coastlines. And this is the type of stuff, and one of the things that he manages to achieve from that is he regains the Balearic Islands, which had been actually re-seized by people and were not conquered since Musa ibn Nusayr. So Abdul Rahman II once again annexes the whole Balearic Islands, which includes places like Mallorca and so on, or to the Iberian Peninsula. Allahu Akbar, people. He then receives a peace offering from Denmark. the king of Denmark writes to him. You see, what does this demonstrate? You see, when people are on a high, everybody wants to be good with them. You see, when people have that spirit, Allahu Akbar. See, there is a poet known as Jigar Muradabadi, who says, जो मिटा सके हमें वो ज़माने में दम नहीं, खुद हमसे है ज़माना, ज़माने से हम नहीं. He says that a force that can destroy us, he says, like such forces cannot be found. In a way, like meaning almost out of, in that type of boastful manner. But he says that the times and the people are by us. We are not defined by them. But you see, wherever Muslims historically set their eyes upon something and they backed it with determination, Allahu Akbar, you see that Allah grants Muslims huge success. And that is sunnatullah. That is the sunnah of Allah. وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. And we do not see these sunnah of Allah changing. This really, with the end of Abdul Rahman II, it is 100 years of rule which comes to an end. What we start to see then is the second era, which is almost the derailing aspect, which is from 238 Hijri to 300 Hijri. It is succeeded by the children and offspring of the Umayyad rulers, beginning with the children like Muhammad, who is the son of Abdul Rahman II, and then after him by Munzir, and after him by Abdullah. We start to see that wealth and opulence is prevalent. Muslims are quite wealthy. They are ruling. They've got a lot of entertainment taking place. We start to see that these things, that when this happens, there's a lot of this, a selfish nature begins to emerge. Remember, generosity and giving is a huge and a hugely significant component of a Muslim's character. The Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, Wallahi lal faqra akhsha alaykum, that by Allah it is not poverty I fear of, bal an tubsatu dunya, rather that the world be opened before you, kama busitat ala man kana qablakum, as it was open for those before you, fatuhlikakum kama ahlaqathum, and that it destroys you as it had destroyed those who went before you. Another interesting thing which historians relate is the arrival of this person who had actually arrived in the time of Abdul Rahman II. His name was Ziryab, and he was actually a major musician from the east, from Baghdad. His teacher's name was Ibrahim al-Mawsili, and they say that he had some issues with Ibrahim, and then eventually he fled Baghdad, and he didn't know where to go, and so he thought of Al-Andalus being a very rich type of region of the Muslim world, and he went there, and he does bring these trends to Al-Andalus. He brings fashion trends. He is the one, they say, one of the earliest sources to be speaking of a different dress sense for each season. He kind of speaks about winter should have its own dress sense, and summer should have this, and spring should have this. He kind of introduces the 3-course meal. He introduces different hairstyles into Al-Andalus. They say he kind of popularizes certain colors. And with him, he brings certain instruments. And he kind of popularizes the whole music trend, which goes on to set up this, what becomes known as the muwashahat, and this type of particular poetry and a musical trend of Al-Andalus. He plays a key role in that as well. How much of that, perhaps from some angle, there may be some exaggeration, but I mean, he does play a significant role in this type of lifestyle emerging. However, you see, what begins to happen is with the attention of the rulers turning away from what they should be doing, what you start to see are rebellions. People begin to rebel. People say, oh, we want this, we don't want to pay this tax, we don't want to do this, we don't want to, and all of a sudden you've got rebellions. Then one of the key rebellions is that of a person known as Umar ibn Hafsun. Folks, this person plays a key role in Andalusian history. What this guy starts to do is he starts to rebel in the south, and he gets a huge amount of people around him. They rebel, he gets certain alliances from people. He takes over places like Ustujja, and if you remember, Ustujja, when it was originally conquered by Musa ibn Usayd, was one of the most fortified cities. He takes that over. He takes over Jiyan, he takes over Gharnata, he takes over a huge portion of the south of Al-Andalusia. Whilst this is going on, people in the north start to rebel. The kingdom of Aragon starts to see what's going on, so it starts to increase its attacks upon the neighboring towns and villages and provinces. You see, in Ishbiliya, Seville, a man by the name of Hajjaj rises and has his own insurgency and rebellion, and he takes over Seville, and what he does is lend support to Umar ibn Hafsun. Umar ibn Hafsun, they say also at this time, many historians relate that he converts to Christianity. This brings him extra support from the Christian kingdom of Aragon and also Leon in the north. Now, these rebellions then trigger further rebellions which begin to take place in Valencia. Valencia all of a sudden has somebody rise who claims independence. So does Zaragoza, Zaragoza in the northeast. You start to see the West Andalus, a man by the name of Abdul Rahman ibn al-Jalliqi rises and he takes over and declares it independent, doing his own thing. What seems to be left under Umayyad rule? Except the small areas surrounding Cordoba. Cordoba and its surrounding villages, that's all. Whilst all of this is going on, Allahu Akbar, the Christian kingdoms which were in the north, they have their own politics going on, and from them you've had Aragon, which had its capital Barcelona, and it was already and it's existing. You've had the kingdom of Leon, but whilst this is going on, there is a split with or some type of dispute which takes place in the kingdom of Leon, and a new Christian kingdom emerges in the north, the kingdom of Navarre or Navarre, which is really the Basque region of Spain. The northern Christian three kingdoms, which are now quite established, begin to increase their raids and attacks upon the Muslim kingdom, upon different Muslim cities within Al-Andalus. To make matters worse, people, Abdullah, who was the last caliph, his son, whose name was Mutarrif. Now, he has two sons, Mutarrif and Muhammad. Mutarrif actually kills Muhammad, who is the crown prince. So now, not only is all this going on, the crown princes are being assassinated by their own brothers. Allahu Akbar. Whilst all of that is taking place, let me add Whilst all of that is taking place, people, if we step back slightly, in northwest Africa, the Umayyads have taken over, which were an extremely deviant, really, but like strand of Shiism, and they were massacring Sunni ulama, and it was well known. And what they begin to do is lend and support arms, as they begin to support the movement of Umar ibn Hafsun, who had also taken on by that time the name Samuel. Okay, they call him Samuel in Arabic. He had taken on that the Christian name. They begin to support him with artillery and weapons and ammunition from North Africa. Whilst that is taking place, you've got the Christian kingdoms increasing heavily their attacks from the north. You've got independence and rebellions declared in every corner and almost every city of Al-Andalus. All this is taking place. You see, the average common Muslim, he is overtaken by a sense of despondency, like what can be done? What can be done, people? It wasn't so long ago that we were talking of Abdul Rahman al-Dakhil and the legendary stability which he had put in place. And look now. Let's zoom out slightly further. Let's zoom out. What do we see? Northwest Africa, as we zoom out, North Africa, is being ruled by the Umayyads. Egypt and Sham is being ruled by the Ikhshidiyin. Mosul, a part of Iraq, is being ruled by Ibn Hamdan. Bahrain and Yamama has been taken over by the Qaramita, a sect. Asbahan is being ruled by Bani Buwayh. They've taken that over. They were a group of the Shia. Khurasan, which is modern day Afghanistan and so on, had been ruled by somebody known as Nasr Samani, had taken that over. Kerman had been taken over by somebody known as Muhammad ibn Ilyas. Ahwaz had been ruled by the Buraydiyin. Where were the Abbasids? The Abbasiyin, where are they? Just Baghdad. People, the whole Muslim empire, the whole Muslim world is in pieces. Allahu Akbar. This is where inni tadhakkartu wa dhikra mu'arriqatun. Majdan talidan bi aydina aba'nahu. أنا نظرت إلى الإسلام في بلد تجده كالطير مقصوصا جناحه. He says, I remember, but the thing about remembering and reminiscing is that it makes you lose your sleep at night. He says, I remember a glory that we had in our hands, but we've lost it. That wherever you look at Islam in any part of the globe, you find it as a bird whose wings have been clipped and cut off. He says that استرشد الغرب بالماضي فأرشده وَنَحْنُ كَانَ لَنَا مَاضٍ نَسِينَاهُ. That people had looked for wisdom, and they found it really in like people like the West and Europe, and that's for a later time, and how they had fixed themselves up. But he says we had a history. We had a history. These people, civilizations, took heed from history. We had a history, yet we forgot it. He says, يَا مَنْ يَرَى عُمَرَ تَكْسُوهُ بُرْدَتُهُ وَالزَّيْتُ عُدْمٌ لَهُ وَالْقُوخُ مَأْوَاهُ يَحْتَزُّ كِسْرَى عَلَى كُرْسِيِّهِ فَرَقًا مِنْ خَوْفِهِ وَمَلُوكُ الرُّومِ تَخْشَاهُ. That all who sees Umar with his simple dress and simple food, that the kings of Persia and Rome feared him. This, and that they would tremble on their thrones with him. He says, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ مَا قَلَبْنَا سِيرَتَهُمْ يَوْمًا وَلَا أَخْطَعَ دَمْعُ الْعَيْنِ مَجْرَاهُ. Allah knows that we have never invested even a moment to learn about the lives of these people. Never have we even mistakenly shed a tear for the remembrance or for the lives of these people. And he mentions that لا در در امرئ يطري أوائله فخرا ويطرق رأسه إن سألته ما. That there is nothing so special about a person who just goes on about his forefathers, but when you ask him, who are you? He has to drop his head in shame. This is the world. Now that was us having zoomed out. Let's zoom back into the Iberian Peninsula. Where can help possibly come from? Samuel or Umar ibn Hafsun in the south, independence cried out in every corner, rebellions, bloodshed, poverty, the northern Christian kingdoms attacking further south, North Africa being ruled by the Ubaydiyin, who were really a minority and just torturing people and yet supporting the rebellion of Umar ibn Hafsun. Where could help come from? What could only help this situation is a miracle. A miracle, people. But Allahu Akbar. As Allah teaches us that Ud'uni astajib lakum. Reach out to Allah, Allah will help you. And people, that miracle does come indeed. Not only does it come, it comes to turn this peninsula around in such a manner that it unifies, fortifies, and raises this kingdom to become one of the most powerful kingdoms known in the European continent and in the world at its time. Who was that miracle? For that we'll continue inshallah next session. Till then, inshallah, du'aakum as-salih. Remember me in your kind du'as. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala.